Let's continue Startup Village, and in the next 30 minutes, the Center of Intellectual Property and the Office of Knowledge Transfer of Skoltech is going to talk about the management of IP in universities, commercialization in projects, and technology transfer. Let's talk about what an ideal office of technology transfer on the premises of a university should be. I'm very happy to welcome Anton Pushkov, the managing partner of CIS Skolkovo, and Viktoriya Imanova, representative of Skolkovo Institute of Science and Technology, and Georgy Klushin, the senior specialist on IP in Skolkovo Institute on Technology. Hello, dear friends. I'm very happy to be here, very happy to see you all, both online and offline. And today we would like to talk about a very peculiar and novel topic that deals with universities on the whole. That's intellectual property in the framework of its active commercialization. We all know that universities and institutes are centers where innovations appear, where research and development is performed, and the results of such research and development may, in this or that manner, reach the market. New technologies require new formats of certification and patenting, and we will first talk about the management of IP in universities and commercialization and technology transfer. What is transfer of technology? And we will talk about very exclusive research about what is happening among Russian universities and in Russian universities. I presume that the statistics is quite interesting and attractive. We're going to talk about the trends in licensing in Russian higher education universities. So I believe that you will enjoy this session. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you, Anton, for bringing us here. This is indeed a very important trend. There are a lot of cases in America and in Europe when researchers at the university can boast certification of their knowledge, but I don't think that this is a widespread practice among Russian universities. Let's begin with the fact that the very notion of data of knowledge transfer is a very new format. Some time ago, when universities fostered education, when universities built the educational process, is in the past, and today there are three components of university activities. That's knowledge, education, and innovation. Within the Bologna system of education, we understand that just educating, teaching, mentoring is not sufficient, and it's no less important to do innovation and present these to the market and commercialize these innovation. In this case, I would like to ask Anton a question. How do Russian universities interact in terms of the transfer of knowledge? And how many cases do you know where there is an active transfer of knowledge And how does it work? Well, to be honest, that works not very smoothly. Looking back at the 60s and 70s of the 20th century, where our universities started to optimize and support the licensing work and patents, help to obtain patents. We got those patent departments even in the Soviet times. So in the Soviet times, it was present, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the activities of those patent agencies declined maybe 100 times. So by 2005, the number of those patent agencies was scarce. And today, since 2016, when there is when appeared new initiatives on the premises of Skolkovo Institute, we have seen more activities in the universities in terms of licensing and obtaining patents. And many people, however, don't know where to start and don't know how to do that. Can we please move to the next slide? So today, there has been a lot of debate over whether there is a difference between transfer of knowledge and transfer of technologies, and where is the borderline between the former and the latter. But well, for clarity, let us agree that transfer of knowledge and transfer of technology are similar things. Let me briefly list the main differences. First of all, transfer of knowledge is the transfer of knowledge, experience, and technology and rights for them. The results of the research and activities is more than just knowledge and experience, but it's also the rights for using them. And these rights have to be registered for a person or an institution. In addition, that's assistance in application this kind of knowledge and technologies, so that the market, the public are aware of their existence. And now I would like to ask a question to Georgy. We know that some prefer to create the transfer of knowledge to certify knowledge in-house. Others prefer to license their knowledge and research outside. We know that in the West, in European countries, the proceeds are distributed among different parties, but in Russia, some of the majority of the universities are state-owned, and they are not permitted to commercialize their activities. So there is one of the main options is to license this with a third party. Anton, have you ever seen universities asking for help? Sure. Once a company came to me, and a company similar to Benilata. It was quite a complicated structure of the company with a lot of restrictions for the copyright, for the rights. They had a lot of shares and shareholders. Licensing was prohibited for them. After a while, the restrictions were some of the restrictions were released. So there were a lot of complications in terms of certification. So we spent a lot of time and effort on approving the restructuring of this university and company. And after a while, we improved the situation, and the situation improved slightly after a while, but this this amount of restrictions for certifying products obtained during the research and development in universities is still there. There are a lot of characteristics and complications still.
Значит, если у него доля, значит, он за ней может следить. Это еще определенная головная боль для ректора. В общем, мы не можем сказать сейчас, что МИПы явились таким вот прям прогрессом.
So today, those new structures seem to be helping a lot to universities, but still there are a lot of complications. So globally, in Russia, this kind of new structure is applied only in 5% of universities. Thus, there are certain advantages of creating the transfer of technology on the platforms of universities. It is possible to gain profit, to commercialize the activities. However, there are a lot of different other formats for creating transfer of technologies, which you can select depending on the targets, the resources, the duration of the project, and the strategy of development. We have jumped into the issue of what happens next, but on the slide we have a bit different thing. So the first steps, the beginning, the onset of the process, we call it the ideal tech transfer. Why we call it ideal? You can see on the slide a linear, consecutive development, but in fact it's not consecutive. At the onset, there is research and licensing of the intellectual property and activity. And of course, this process is recursive in some places. It reiterates in some cases. It deals with the patent portfolio, which is quite a complicated thing. But basically, it starts with the research. After the research, the disclosure of individual activity occurs when the researchers talk about the transfer of technology and disclose what they have achieved. So I would like to ask a question to Georgy. What are the major stages of this step? Actually, professors do not apply themselves, and quite often we have to knock on the door of the lab and ask the professors and researchers what is going on. Do you need our help? Do you need to license anything? And then, if they do, we need to find out whether there are any competitors, whether similar things have been licensed before. And then we move to the next step. We provide the assessment of the technology. We compare it with other technologies, and if we can see that everything is okay with that, we move on to assessment of technology. Anton, are there any typical features of this process? Of course, there is a problem when some people make an application just to have a tick, just to fill a report, just to achieve their KPIs, just to for the sake of the application. Of course, knowledge transfer implies that we deal with inventions and or innovations, and we need to take it to the market in the end. So we need to assess the power of the patent. We need to talk with the developers whether they are ready to support their products on the commercialization stage. So altogether, in a series of organizations, they need to report on the transfer, on the KPI. They need to invest money and effort and human resource into that. So we in Skolkovo warn in advance that in our case, with us, the patents are the patents that have to be and will be commercialized further. What is the patent landscape and the patentability? If we're talking about patentability, whether we can obtain a patent or not, that has to be assessed through each patent agency with databases, with open sources. The researchers will need to brush through the scientific research, the publications, and so on. We need to define whether something we want to patent is of novel importance, whether this is something really new and didn't exist before. In a series of countries, actually, this novelty is not an issue. So patentability has to be checked. We check all the sources of information. We check the patentability. Then we check whether it can be applied in real life. The next step is checking the purity or cleanliness of the patent, whether it interferes with any other patents, whether the formula of a certain medication, if we're talking about medication, is unique and does not challenge the existing patents or licenses. Otherwise, we will have to pay the royalty for the technical solution that we use in our product. And the next step is the patent landscape that has to be considered. Patent literature is the precious information of technical solutions that you will mention in your application to the patent agency. It cannot be ignored. The database, the Rospatent, the database of intellectual property are available, and you can use them as much as you need. They are all free of charge. You can look through the Google patent, where every day a certain number of new patents are registered. You can check the countries, you can check the authors.
отличный, интересный инструмент, который позволит вам четко отслеживать тренды и направления вашего неопыта.
So Google Patent is actually a cool instrument to find out as much as possible about your product. And thanks to similar instruments like Patent Landscape and Google Patent, you can understand immediately what is the strategy for obtaining the patent you may use. In terms of technical transfer, you cannot use a pattern. So all this research will help you understand what strategy you should follow.
Это касается части изначально времени патентования, то есть когда подавать заявку.
Furthermore, that will make it clear how long it will take to obtain a patent, because in some cases you can play with know-how instruments and then certify them, because there may be certain factors. For example, keeping a commercial secret can turn out to be better than applying for a patent in some cases. If we talk about going global, you can also see there whether you first need to apply for an international patent and then apply for the Russian patent or otherwise.
Для кого-то это большое, потому что время это все-таки преимущество. 30 месяцев для того, чтобы решить, когда и куда спускаться, в зависимости от готовности рынка. Собственно, следующий стадий.
The next stage is marketing of the technology. This also comes from the data collected on the patent landscape. It becomes clear whom you can sell it to and what will be the conditions for sale, whether the market is ready or not, what kind of format of this license is most appropriate. Georgy will talk about it more in his presentation, and I just can add that there are 4 types of this kind of technology. One of them is licensing. Licensing can be exclusive, inclusive, or it can be a contribution into the capital, it can be a share in a startup, and so on.
Одним основным словом происходит самая, наверное, сладкая часть, это распределение роялти. Каждый университет здесь
the third option is expropriation. The most interesting thing, of course, is distributing the royalty. For example, Skoltech uses the following policy: 10% is distributed in terms of commercialization among the authors, 30% is attributed to the lab, and 30% remains at the university to support the intellectual property and the back office, which supports the project throughout the entire life cycle. And of course, the maintenance of support of the processes. There are a lot of peculiarities here. You need to keep to study the reports of your licensees, to keep in touch with them, and prevent any violations and challenges. This is the slide that reflects an ideal tech transfer. and how it works in real life, Georgy will tell us in detail. Let us take a couple of examples how Russian universities apply for patents. We've selected 34 universities that have ratings in New York TR and AC Expert. That automatically brings us to the first result, confirming that Russian universities, on average, obtain licenses for only 3% of patents. That's so few, that's very little, because transfer of technology is so important. And the university with their patents have to be commercializable and have to gain profit. There are a couple of brilliant examples for commercialization, but there is so much room for improvement. Let me support Russian universities and tell you that 3% is not that bad, because globally only 0.3% of patents are commercialized. But if we compare this to the United States, to their top universities, they managed to commercialize up to 20% of their inventions. In Skoltech, we are at about 15% rate of commercialization, but we need to mention that we are very careful and thorough when selecting this or that innovation for patenting, so our result is quite nice. 15% is a wonderful result, I do agree. At the beginning of this meeting in 2016, Anton mentioned that in 2016, the number of patent applications grew significantly, but they started to license them only in 2017. Today we can see that licensing activities are growing, and I believe that's a very good sign. And still the patent applications are quite high. So universities are becoming more market-oriented, I believe, here. Another important and peculiar thing is that time to market, the velocity of licensing has declined significantly. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide the number of months between the date of license and the date of priority. So it has declined to 4 years since the priority date. I believe that's due to the initiative of the Global Organization for Intellectual Property, which has been interacting quite actively, cooperating with Russian universities quite actively, providing their support, providing their consultation, how to speed up the process. There are a lot of areas and labs in Skolkovo. You can see that on the screen. Those include new cross-sectional technologies, electricity and microelectronics, physics, machine building, construction, chemistry, metallurgy, transportation, medical sciences, and agriculture. A huge number of licenses have occurred in chemistry and metallurgy, in physics, in transportation and industrial processes, and in agriculture. In terms of oil and gas, all the universities have offered a lot of innovations and licensed them quite actively. Do you think that it's because of the universities, or do you think that it's because of the market itself? I believe both, because attracting young specialists from the Oil and Gas Institute, for example, spend a lot of time to improve their programs.
There is a great connection and coordination between universities and corporations. There are different support programs and big budgets, so it is really great for them. It's true, oil and gas and metallurgy, these are the fastest. Let's look at the type of licenses which Viktoriya has mentioned. Most of the licenses, these are not these licenses. Usually it's about R&D. It is about the results and patents. We have the small share. These are exclusive licenses, and they now give open licenses. It is really surprising. We don't understand this trend. These licenses are for patents and for industrial. Probably it's about benefits. If you have this patent and license, then you have a number of benefits, duties. So Rose Patent, they are actively working on this. A year ago, they started this program with universities, so now there is a growth of requests and applicants, and with this growth, to manage this load, now they just put open licenses. I feel that it is about it. Then I have a next slide which tells that open licenses, this is about the start, then it is on the shelf for 6 and 10 years, and then universities decide whether to give IVA licenses or no. This is among our top Russian universities. Maybe it is good to work on patents. You can avoid duties with these tools. Here we confirm that the picture abroad, it is the same that we have here, so most of the licenses are given during the first 4 years. Let's look at the map. Here are the technologies that are described and the patents that are given. There is a connection among types of licenses and the different sectors. It is about R&D, when the company pays for these developments and they have the rights for these inventions. Another type, these are different licenses, and universities, they are quite careful with this. And based on our experiences, this is the way they work with startups. Here on this map, we can see such industries as construction, light industries. It is quite difficult to have a startup in construction or machine building. We usually have big mature players. So can we increase the number of startups? Can they be increased by startups? This is about the startups at universities. It's not really active. They are not focused on this technologies because it's all about red tape. And it is difficult to identify where are the money, how they are distributed. I think that we will see growth later. I hope that will be a different picture in a year. Victoria, maybe you can tell us about the activities, why we need to do talk about it. So there are lots of advantages, and these advantages are really important because usually we talk about difficult processes, but still we can see that universities and authors, startups, which are created in universities, they can achieve something working with this type of property. So if you talk about universities, the main aspects, first of all, it is reputation. And then you have an increase of growth and you can attract the best students. It is the mission that they have. Civil society can support. It is great when the results of intellectual property they meet their niche. They can offer specific services or products, and it is beneficial for the society. And then you have the result, the registered patent. And some important aspects, this is a diversification of the financial sources. It is great to have some kind of funds from royalties, exclusive licenses. It is great to have this, and you don't need to pay attention only to grants. For authors, for researchers, there are special rewards for creation, special support, different shares, the way these royalties can be distributed. It is what motivates us to continue research, to be with universities, to continue our work, and to receive profit. Then it's about reputation. It's not only about some creativity. It is great when you have your product and you have your reputation in place. What is important for startups? When we have initial stages, it is great to have support. So the startups can receive the support, there are specialists, and they work for these offices. They can identify the best strategy to have patents to protect intellectual property, because usually we have the following situation when startups they focus on the technology which is not the one that you need to have. So usually you need to have experts, and universities are also interested to support startups to identify main support measures, to identify possibilities for the support. And it is important to note that these rights, whether they are license right or other right, for example, alienated rights, it is important. It leads to investment from investors, and it can also increase attractiveness, and companies will be more eager to communicate with the startups. 3 years ago, we had a study, and patents, they didn't affect the number of investments, but it can be a great step. So if you have IP, it is easier for you to reach investors. Well, Anton, what are the main advice that you would like to mention when universities cooperate with startups? I feel that it is important to include developers. You can have patents, but still you should have knowledge how to then develop them. Investors, they are interested in the team. They want to understand who are parts of this project, who are the people who receive this money, and they look at these people. So when they look at the intellectual property, they want to analyze people. And you want to involve teachers, professors who are co-authors of these developments or of these inventions, and they should be interested. There are different types of motivations. It can be an option they can have their share in this project, and if you develop your project, they receive more yield. So they are motivated to participate and they are interested in the growth. It's not enough usually because you have people from science and sometimes they are not about money, but you need to have people who are more focused on business. They can create marketing strategy, and it is great when your professors are not so in sales, but they're more focused on scientific part of this project, but you need to have people who will be focused on the development. So you need to identify people who are responsible for sales, for marketing, and for other aspects. So you need to create such team with different competencies. And this startup, it will be commercially viable, it will be profitable, and it is a great challenge that people face. Based on our experience cooperating with startups, we identify specific mistakes that they do. These are do's and don'ts. This is what you need to do, and this is what you need to avoid. So this process is more smooth without these big barriers, and you can achieve the results. So the main moments that Anton has mentioned, it is to share the results of intellectual property sooner the better, because time plays a crucial role. First of all, when you want to present your product, when you want to publish information about it, sure, there is a pressure and you want to publish your research as soon as possible, but it's still important not to miss the chance to register intellectual property, because it is quite often that you need to contact an expert, write down the correct application to describe your product in the right way, and it will protect intellectual property of the product, and then you can publish information about it without hesitation. And here you create opportunities, but without it, without a registering of intellectual property, you can kill these opportunities. So scientific publications, they should be made after your intellectual property is registered. Here we can say that it is about NDA. We have these cases. There are specific problems where we worked with know-how.
собой публикации там,
And when we
соглашений.
talk
Но,
about
тем не менее,
these
случаются
NDA
все-таки,
projects,
опять же, стратегически выбирать,
there you cannot
что
publish
будет
information.
конечным результатом своей деятельности. Всегда это
So here
баланс.
it's a balance.
Дальше. Работа над заявкой с участием патентного
So
оформления.
when we work with
Здесь,
applications,
наверное, ты лучше всех сможешь сказать, почему
here you can
важно
share the information why
написать
it is
заявку
important
самостоятельно,
to work with
вместе
specialists,
с работой с
not to do it on
патентоаффилированными
your own.
одному или там
Why do you need to call patent attorney and to ask for their services?
Да, безусловно. Мы сегодня об этом как раз говорили, отдельное выступление у нас было чуть раньше. Это очень важно,
Well,
чтобы
it is quite
профессионал
important
помог
that
составить
professional
и это не только
specialists help you to write the right document. Yes, we have different samples,
но ведь
but still, the way you describe,
определит объем
it will
и
identify the volume of rights that you have and the way you can protect
потому что
your
иногда
resources.
патент максимально широко, то есть брать себе вообще все признаки, какие только возможно. И если получается увидеть патентный риск, получить патент, при этом
If you want to receive this patent,
случае неприменим.
you have different aspects.
Определенного узкого применения и не закрывают целый сектор экономики или целое направление.
And you don't have these restrictions.
Поэтому только патентный
So only patent attorney who work in this field that you work in, he specializes in this field, he will help you to prepare all the necessary application and to do it in the right form. Because when you work abroad, you know about the practices in these countries, you know about different legal aspects. So please don't do it on your own. If you want to receive this patent, so it is successful, it is a valuable asset, you need to call professionals. And it can lead to fruitful results. Well, it should be a teamwork, and you need to have new solutions. Patent, it can correct only your initial explanation, but the drawings, they should be prepared by inventors. When you have these preliminary documents, it is necessary to have these drawings. So when you have this application, it is necessary to have it. If this application is not correct, then it is the process when you should revoke this. So please be careful, it should be a teamwork, you should invent products together and you should take a look at all these documents together. There is some difficulty that universities have. This is what we mentioned before when they want to transfer this property rights when they use different tools. So, Georgy, maybe it is better to register intellectual property for startup. Well, we need to take into account all interests, but universities, they cannot transfer intellectual property rights to startups because they spend lots of money, they pay money to scientific workers, to professors, so they cannot just give away this IP to startups, because when the startups is successful, they will try to get their IP. So when we have intellectual property which is created within this university, it is the IP of the university, and there should be a correct procedure to transfer these rights. It's not about protection, but there is a risk that there will be issues with these deals. So when we talk about restructurization of the deal, there should be the license agreement on international of intellectual property. You don't want to get it for free. Georgy just mentioned it. But at the same time, you need to understand when we talk about the transfer of rights, this is an agreement that you need to have in place. So if university identify their costs, they use different methods for evaluation, and when they say that there is a sum and you feel that it is not realistic for the startup to provide this amount of money, universities are interested to make these conditions more convenient. Maybe they will divide these sums, or maybe they will try to have this multi-applicator approach. So they will try to do anything to protect intellectual property and to have it done. And the important moment for startups is to attract lawyers, to analyze different contracts, agreements. There are different terms. Some of them, they are quite difficult to understand. So from your side, it is really important to have lawyers who can describe all the things and help you to solve these issues. We have 10 minutes now at the end of our session. This is the end of our presentation. I feel that, Igor, you can share some success stories at Skoltech. We managed to implement these projects. These are examples of what we have talked about. This is what is happening here. We have startups, emerging startups. In terms of IP, they can organize it, and then they can develop their things. You can find these companies at Startup Village. You can communicate with them. You can use application. You can find out what they do. You also can meet us tomorrow. It will be a session of Skoltech from 10 till 3 p.m. It will be an online format, and we will discuss interesting topics about intellectual property. You need to understand why it's impossible for universities and for startups. If you want private consultations, we have a special tube dedicated to us, and you can use this link to register for it. I feel that's it. I see that we have specific questions. I will read out these questions. The first question that we have received: what is the cap of the startups on average in 3 and 5 years? As far as I understand, it is about startups at Skoltech. I cannot say the right number, but we have successful stories which received acknowledgement internationally, and they have all the necessary documents. We will share this information if you want to meet with us. The next question is: what are the legislation which controls the royalty distribution when you use this license, and how do you split these royalties among team members? I would like to comment. It is an internal kitchen of universities. We have our policies as Skoltech. When we say that it is intellectual property, we split it into lab, into startup, into university. The way it is divided among authors and team members, it is written in the agreement, and it is described as a process. So future, when we talk about 1/3 of royalty, it will be distributed with the percents which are indicated in this form. To avoid this conflict, this should be indicated with all the signatures. And you can choose your own approach, the way this yield will be distributed. Authors, they should be paid for the creation. It is written in the law, but it's not a problem. It can be a fixed price or it can be a premium to the salary which most of the scientific workers have. Well, it is an interesting point. You need to follow it, but it's not our task. It can be submitted to the budget unit, and then it can be controlled by internal documents, but you need to have these documents. And last questions are to Anton. If there are any restrictions in terms of loyalty distribution, do we have special legislation? Well, you should understand the status, which is the form that we follow when we talk about Skoltech. Here you have special status. Sure, there are some restrictions from the ministries. The best opportunity for us is to discuss it with the owner. There are specific ministries and maybe some projects they have restrictions. It's not that everything is mentioned in legislation. There are specific manuals, and these manuals are issued by agencies and ministries, but by default there are no restrictions. These royalties are identified based on the agreement achieved by the licensee and the user, and we need to take into account specific situations and specific cases, so you need to identify it on your own. And quite often universities are evaluators, and they look at the project, they look at the assets, and they make this assessment. But you need to have external parties who can evaluate it. But we work with each of the cases. There can be non-refundable licenses. For budget, for public organizations, it is better to contact ministries.
Какая сейчас воронка после 3% лицензирования? Сколько стартапов?
How many startups are created in Russia in a year? Do we have these numbers? I can tell that the plan to patent was actually overachieved when we launched Skolkovo. We did researches, and the number of patents that we planned to give out, it was about 1,000. We achieved, we overcame it, and now it is hundreds of requests in a year, more than 2,000 patents. So the share, most of this is patent requests. For some industries, it is a challenge, but still the support measures that we have from Ross Patent Organization, now you can achieve these patents within half a year. You have these opportunities. It wasn't in place before, but Ross Patent, they do a lot to support this. And there are also trends. There are specific programs which help us to support these companies. So now we have an increase of patents for startups. Talking about universities and 3% which are licensed, we have this plan to look at these participants to understand who they are. Probably we will publish this very soon, and you will be able to look at it. So to wrap up, I would like to note that now there are new technological trends, and now we are looking at hybrid products which impose industrial products and IP. Here are the results of information technologies. databases. So it will be our homework. We will look into it. We will try to understand what is software patent, and we will provide statistics, worldwide statistics, and statistics for Russia also. Thank you that you were with us. I hope that it was interesting for you. It was interesting for us. I would like to repeat that you can contact us, and we will be here today and tomorrow. We'll be in the pipe of Skoltech. Thank you. We'll see you.
Жажда веселья, жажда путешествий, жажда общения. Утоляй любую жажду с освежающими вкусами Липтон. Мой любимый персик.
При низких температурах окружающей среды тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.